Welcome. During this 2-hour program, we will discuss the opportunities for social sciences, humanities, and the arts in Horizon Europe. We will hear about European initiatives to promote these disciplines, get input from experienced researchers, and learn about projects aiming to strengthen interdisciplinarity with the aim of addressing the most important societal challenges. My name is Erik Ingebrigtsen. I am the administrative coordinator of the project NOSHH, but today my role is to be the program host. NOSHH is the Norwegian network for the promotion of social science and humanities perspectives in Horizon Europe. NOSHH partners are the 4 universities in Oslo, Bergen, Trondheim and Tromsø, and the Institute of Social Research in Oslo. NOSHH has a grant from the Research Council of Norway, and all our events are open to everyone who are interested. Before we proceed with the program, we are very happy to have Chief Executive of the Research Council of Norway, Mari Sundli Tveit, to open the event. As Mari is unable to come to the studio today, she joins us on video link.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Horizon Europe, the world's biggest research and innovation program, got underway at the turn of the year. And 2 weeks ago, the Norwegian Parliament unanimously agreed that Norway is going to participate. And the staff at the Research Council, we're naturally delighted about this, first and foremost because this is absolutely crucial for the development of Norwegian research and innovation. This is the world's biggest research and innovation program, but also because the program focus is very much in line with Norwegian interests and priority areas. And Norway has also been actively involved in designing Horizon Europe, and therefore it coincides well with the areas where we excel. And we are very confident that Norwegian research groups can do even better in Horizon Europe than they did in its predecessor, Horizon 2020, where actually a total of 15 billion Norwegian kroner went to Norway. And thank you very much to today's organizers for highlighting Norwegian opportunities in the social sciences and humanities field. The objective of the EU program is to support the green transition and create economic growth and jobs, as well as to resolve the major challenges facing society through research and innovation. This framework program has an even greater focus on ensuring that the results are utilized. The EU is also introducing innovations such as missions, a portfolio of activities with the verifiable goals for visible impacts within a given period of time. And we're confident that Norwegian actors will take active part in resolving the challenges that we as a society face. Norwegian actors are attractive partners in EU projects in many areas, and we have many strong research groups that are at the forefront of their respective fields. One example here is research on challenges such as migration, foreign policy, where Norwegian social scientists particularly excelled in Horizon 2020. The ERC has also produced outstanding results with its social scientists and humanities researchers dominating the funding awarded to Norway in recent years. There is a lot of great work to build on going forward. The Research Council has high ambitions on behalf of Norwegian actors in Horizon Europe, and we are ready to help you with the application process. We have many excellent advisors who are experts in their designated areas of the EU programs, and we offer advice, guidance, and financial assistance schemes in connection with writing applications and courses. These services are open to everyone, regardless of their location in Norway. So the EU train is moving full steam ahead, and I hope that today's event will inspire you and make you aware of the many exciting opportunities for the social sciences and humanities in the EU system. And the Research Council is here to help you. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Mari Sundli Tveit. In a few minutes, we will hear more about the opportunities for SSH in Horizon Europe, but before that, we will have a brief introduction to the framework program's structure and main purpose. The video is in Norwegian, but we added subtitles so that the message should come across also to the non-Norwegian speaking audience.
Horisont Europa EUs 9. rammeprogram for forskning og innovasjon, og overtar det pågående Horisont 2020. Når EU åpner for de første utlysningene i programmet i 2021, ligger det over 90 milliarder euro i potten. Hovedmålet med Horisont Europa å styrke Europas vitenskapelige og teknologiske fundament og det europeiske forskningsområdet, ERA. Og det å styrke Europas innovasjonskapasitet og konkurransekraft og skape arbeidsplasser. Og et annet viktig mål å følge opp innbyggernes prioriteringer og bidra til å løse store samfunnsutfordringer. Gjennom EØS-avtalen har Norge kunnet delta i alle de foregående rammeprogrammene, selv om vi ikke medlem av EU. Utlysningene i Horisont Europa kan deles inn i 3 søyler. I søyle 1, fremragende forskning, kan det søkes finansiering til banebrytende, nysgjerrighetsdrevet forskning. I søyle 2, globale utfordringer og konkurransedyktig næringsliv, ligger mer enn halvparten av budsjettet. Her vil det finansieres forskning og innovasjon til prosjekter der akademia, næringsliv og offentlige aktører samarbeider om å løse samfunnsutfordringer og øke verdiskapningen. I søyle 3, Innovativt Europa, eller åpen innovasjon, målet å finansiere banebrytende eller innovative teknologier med potensial for kommersialisering. Her kan også bedrifter søke om egenkapital og garantier til vekst og skalering. Effektene blir størst når kunnskap deles, og løsningene kan tas i bruk av flere. Det er dette EUs forsknings- og innovasjonsprogrammer bidrar til. De har stor betydning for bedrifter, miljøer og offentlig sektor. Forskning og innovasjon fra prosjektene bidrar til å styrke næringslivet, skape flere arbeidsplasser og til å løse noen av vår tids største utfordringer. Forskningsrådet og Innovasjon Norge har mange ordninger og rådgivere som hjelper deg både i søknadsprosessen og ved prosjektoppstart. Vår erfaring at de som benytter seg av vårt støtteapparat har større sjanse for å lykkes. Vi her for deg. Å delta i Horisont Europa å investere i fremtiden.
If you have any questions for our speakers, do not hesitate to put these questions in the chat function in the live stream. We will address these questions in the last hour of the program, starting at 10 o'clock. With me here in the studio, I have the pleasure of introducing Tobias Badestrøm. Tobias is a special advisor at the Research Council of Norway, where he's a national contact point both for the cluster Culture, Creativity and Inclusive Society, and for missions. Prior to 2018, Tobias worked in the European Commission, where his main task was to coordinate the work of integrating social sciences and humanities throughout Horizon 2020. So Tobias, thank you for joining us here today. We have given you the challenging task of briefly introducing the main opportunities for social sciences and humanities in Horizon Europe. Please.
Thank you, Eric. It's a pleasure for me to be with you today. I will give a brief overview of the opportunities for the social sciences and humanities in the Horizon Europe program. The policy context is favorable to the social sciences and humanities. The Sustainable Development Goals have been important for the political process and to the adoption of Horizon Europe. And then you have the Green Deal with the principle of no one to be left behind, which is an important aim for the program. So the combination green shift, SSH aspects will become increasingly important. There are many references to social sciences and humanities in the strategic plan, I would say that social economic impact is as equally important as innovation and scientific technological breakthroughs. SSH integration is emphasized once again, and humanities and the arts are becoming more prominent. This holds a lot of promise for Norwegian and international applicants. References to cultural and creative industries, human-centered innovation, and cultural heritage is growing in importance. So this is the full program in this slide. Cluster 2, Pillar 2 holds the most important opportunity with its 3 destinations dedicated to SSH questions. But you also find the previous program swaths with its topics now in Pillar 4. Pillar 1 is almost as in Horizon 2020, certainly with European Research Council holding a lot of promise for the SSH. You also have social innovation growing in importance, so SSH scholars should not neglect the opportunities in the EIC and EIT programs of the 3rd pillar. There are 6 clusters in Pillar 2 where there is large cooperation projects to solve grand challenges across disciplines and sectors. And together with the EIC, missions is a new feature in the program. 5 missions are foreseen with cross-sectoral and cross-disciplinary cooperation, as well as societal impact and citizen engagement. In my view, 2 of these mission areas are particularly suited for SSH engagement. These are smart and climate-neutral cities, and adaptation to climate change and societal transformation. But naturally, the others on oceans, soil health, and cancer also depend on SSH contributions. In this slide, I have included a couple of topics in Cluster 5 and Cluster 1 of the program, but there are many others across all clusters and also in the other pillars. So when preparing proposals answering to such calls, interdisciplinary aspects in all work packages should be identified from the very beginning. This was one of the main challenges we had with SSH integration in the previous program, Horizon 2020. So what can we expect in Horizon Europe? There will be more real co-design in more topics in line with the strategic objectives. Evaluation practices involving broader panels has been a priority of DG Research and Innovation, and I hope this will be also in reality the case. Some challenges remain. Formulate topics in a similar way across clusters using an open language and neutral terms to describe the challenges. I'm soon coming to a close. I've included this to confirm that stakeholders have to unite, and the NOSHH project being, of course, one of these. As a policy officer following the work of NOSHH, I'm very excited to see some of them here today in the agenda, such as EASH and the SHAPE ID project. We need a joint effort in Europe, and one of my recommendations is also to have alliances with others that are non-SSH, and I've included a couple of those here who don't have SSH as their main focus. So thank you for the attention. I'm looking forward to the further outcomes of this project.
Many thanks to Tobias. You will stay with us for the discussion part, so if you have any questions to Tobias, do not hesitate to ask them in the chat. Gabi Lombardo is the director of the European Alliance for Social Sciences and Humanities, in brief NOSHH, the advocacy and science policy organization for these fields in Europe. Gabi is an expert in both higher education and global research policy, and Gabi has worked with the London School of Economics, the European Research Council and Science Europe. She's joining us now from Brussels. Gabi, thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to be part of this event. Thank you.
If we could just briefly introduce us to NOSHH, for those who do not know the work of NOSHH, what is really the European Alliance for Social Sciences and Humanities?
Well, the European Alliance is an umbrella organization with over 65 members now. We started with barely 18, only 4 years ago. And we now have 65 members between universities like NTNU and all the members of NOSHH, Bergen and the Social Science Institute. But also we have European disciplinary associations. About a third are European-wide disciplinary associations like the European Sociological Association, and also some actually are global, like Carmen, the Association of Medievalists.
So how has NOSHH worked now over the recent years to promote the role and position of social sciences and humanities in Horizon Europe?
The alliance came or emerged like almost a root movement at the time when Horizon 2020 was discussed and was completely missing social science-driven challenge. And so it has already started with a sense of engaging with having this interface between researchers in social science with science policy makers, both at the European level, but also in ministry at the national level, for dedicated strategies for social science humanities, also at the national level. And the purpose is to design the investment in future research, education, and innovation in line with social science humanities demands or shape and methods of research. We also encourage a lot of our members to engage with the science policy mechanism and work together to make the research result of this community more visible to stakeholders of any kind, NGOs and other organizations, particularly research users in both the public and private funders. We're now actually also getting even more engaged with other platforms at continental level in the US, Canada, South Africa, really to coordinate an advocacy, but also support for the methods of research in social science and humanities.
So that's a really broad scope of your activities. And if you look now at the start of Horizon Europe, how would you assess the result of this process? Have you succeeded, or what do you think now when you see the Horizon Europe framework program being launched?
Well, as Tobias was saying, we definitely consider Horizon Europe a success story so far. We really had been addressed many of the issues that we addressed over the years for Horizon 2020, which had a very little effect. So once the program started, it's very difficult to change the architecture of the program. We see all the recommendations that we've been making over the years in Horizon 2020 have been trickled down into the framework, at least into the architecture of the program. So things like what Tobias mentioned, panels evaluation, which are broader with more SSH specialities and expertise, or, for example, the criteria in the flag topics that if you do not address social science humanities, you need to explain why you don't. In Horizon 2020, some flag topics had only 30% of projects with social science humanities, which obviously it makes no sense. If it is a requirement, it should be there. So we have been highlighted technical points very clearly, very simplistic and very straight to the point and to make improvement. And they seem to have a trickle down both at the level of the technicalities, also the budget. We had a massive role in coordinating the discussion of the Science Council when the budget was discussed at the Council of Europe. And this cluster has the biggest budget that any SSH program ever had in a framework program. So yeah, we're hopeful, but the test will be the implementation. So we're going to carry on monitoring and watching step by step.
Sure that you will keep a good and close eye on them. But you already mentioned a little bit about your recommendations, how to build alliances. But if you could just maybe elaborate a little bit on that, what would be your key recommendations now from NOSHH to the social science and humanities community right now?
Well, we've been effective because we created critical mass. So one of the major problems or weakness of social science humanities has been scattered around and not having a coherent narrative. With a membership of 65 members, we managed to have at least a strong point, a strong visibility point, and make a coherent set of recommendations which could not be ignored. But also it's important that individual scholars, so this is for institutions and organizations. For individual scholars, it's very crucial to engage, not just to apply for funding, which not everybody probably wants to do or will do it, but to contribute with expertise. So sign yourself up as an expert in the database. It's really important. And look at your expertise as a researcher, not simply from your research perspective, but how your research impact on public policy. So get engaged, get involved in the evaluations, in the panels, in the design of the program. And one thing that we're planning to do is also to review the intervention areas of Horizon Europe and the other clusters and see if some topics that could be flagged for SSH have not been flagged, and change the language of those who have been flagged to allow the people to participate more and better according to their methods and their methodologies and their research questions. So engage,
so, yeah,
get involved.
So get engaged. That's a good recommendation, and I hope that this event will also be a start for that. Gabi, thank you very much. You will also join us for the discussion part. So if you have any questions for Gabi, don't hesitate to ask. Now we will move on to hear from some of the researchers. Two of the researchers, I would say that Gabi and others are trying to assist with their efforts. And although our next guest is spending a lot of his time in Oslo, he is not here today. Jan Paul Brekke will join us from Switzerland. Jan Paul Brekke is a senior research fellow at the Institute for Social Research in Oslo. His main area of interest is in migration research, including on asylum policy and on integration. He is currently working on the causes of high COVID-19 infection rates in some immigrant groups. Jan Paul, thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you. Yes, it's great. Good morning, everyone.
And that you're here to share some of your experience in working on the EU projects. But could you please tell us first, and how did you first get involved in EU projects, and what are the main projects that you have been involved in?
Yes. Well, actually, I was first involved as an expert. We heard that just now from Gabi that you can sign up as an expert, and I was asked to do so in the area of migration research. And that led to me being engaged in evaluating applications and following through on projects, which meant following a project all the way through to the end, to the evaluation stage as well. So that gave me insights into the process from the very start all the way to the end, to when the final deliverable had been delivered. So I've done that, but now I'm engaged also as a researcher. And that actually the first task and the first assignment led to this role as a researcher in a project led from in a consortium consisting of 11 countries, institutions, and we're studying the narratives of migration and the impact of migration narratives, both in Europe and in Africa. So that project is led from Barcelona and Florence, and we've just started this. We just started this this spring, and we're going to follow through for the next 2 years.
Very interesting project, Jan-Paul. Could you please tell us a little bit about your motivation to take part? I mean, you said that you started as an expert, but now you're a participant in projects. So what has been your motivation in taking part in this European project? And could you also maybe say something about what you have gained from your participation?
Yes, I think I've gained a lot. Gained new contacts, insights into how other institutions throughout Europe think about these projects and think about the Horizon programs, how they work, the methodology, their sincereness, and the number of resources they make available to following through on these projects and also in the application phase. So I think I've been quite impressed by how much it takes. Everyone knows how much it takes, but it's actually possible to organize this in a way that makes it feasible. So I've been impressed by all the partners. And your first question was, what was the first?
So your own motivation to take part in this.
Well, it's obvious. Not everybody does this. No. Absolutely, yeah, it's obvious. I think it's quite obvious when you see the call for tenders and you see the programs. There are, I mean, I think most people in the social sciences will find one or two maybe that kind of really lights up in your head and feels like, okay, this gets your bloodstream, your blood flowing as a researcher. And certainly in the field of migration, it's been a lot of those projects and call for tenders within the programs following the migration crisis in 2015. So for us as migration researchers, it's been a real treat to read these programs and look for calls that really hit the spot and really brings the idea and makes it easy to see partners as well.
So if I could change the topic a little bit, I know that many researchers find it challenging to describe and to achieve the societal impact part and also the involvement of non-academic partners. Do you have any experience in these areas from your projects?
I mean, working in the field of migration and I work with the refugee policies, etc. So we're always in contact with. I do a lot of research that is commissioned by government bodies, both in Norway and in Europe. And it's always a question, you know, what is the purpose? How does this help the policy development, etc.? So we're always in close contact with these bodies, and I think that setting up frameworks, workshops, etc. It feels a bit strange for a lot of researchers. It feels safer to stay away from the impact field, but in the field of migration, we're kind of forced to being out there, to taking part in the public debates and seeing the needs of society, the needs for knowledge. So I think it's a bit easier for us maybe than for some other brands of research. But it's obvious. I mean, in the project we have now, the Bridges project, we have there are arts installations. There's even a rap competition that we are underneath this umbrella, this huge umbrella of the project. We will also do these things, which is not. I mean, as Norwegian researchers, I think several people listening in today, we are as far away from the rap culture as possible to get. But this underneath the umbrella, we have partners who are experts on this and are kind of have their attachment and their have a feel for this, how to organize it. So we're having it's a cross-border international European contest. They'll have lots of videos made, and we also have connection points with decision makers at all levels in the European government and at the national level. And I also would like to mention that, I mean, I'm going to do field work in Africa next year and in Sudan. And also there, we're kind of forced through the projects to involve the local community and to make sure that we have impact also on the local level in the countries where we do research that normally have less resources for research. So the whole program and the research community in Europe kind of forces you to have this impact. And so, I mean, you might as well embrace it.
But yeah, I understand that your field is very much impact-oriented, but still there are many decisions made here, and especially hearing about the rap contest, that sounds like something that we would like to know more about. So we look forward to the publication of that. Do you have any sort of last-minute advice for people in the audience who have not so far been involved in European projects?
Yes, I think there are two
steps.
Yeah, I think what the first thing is to get into the process early. I think that's already been said. That's really crucial, because the number two advice is to be networking. You need to have a network that's already there. You have to know of your network, because these decisions are made by the institutions at a very early stage. So one, be early, early and know what's coming up regarding calls. And be very early at networking and contacting these partners, just saying that we're interested. Have you been looking at this? What are your thoughts? Keep us in the loop if you are going forward with a proposal. So those I think are initial and very important advice.
Thank you. And Jan Paul will also stay with us for the last hour of the program. So if you have questions for him, just put them in the chat. So the next researcher who will share this experience from Horizon 2020 is Professor Christian Klöckner from the Department of Psychology at NTNU. Unfortunately, Christian is not able to join us live here today, but fortunately, Christian and I are practically neighbors. So I just popped over to his garden for a chat a few days ago. Christian, thanks for joining us from your garden here in Trondheim.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
So Christian, for those who don't know you, could you please give us a brief introduction to your experience in working with European projects?
Okay, I have had quite a number of projects in recent years. So it all started like 5-6 years ago when we applied for the first EU project with me as a coordinator, and we were lucky or good to be awarded the grant, and then we worked in that project. And from then it just has developed. So once you're in the system and you know how things work there, there are more contacts and more projects that you get. And what binds them all together is that these projects have to do with energy decisions or climate decisions, behavior that people have, and that changing lifestyles is like one of the things that almost all of the projects deal with.
Okay, but to sum up, if I'm correct, you have coordinated so far, or in the process of coordinating 3 projects.
Yeah.
And also being partner and work package leader in several more. So this is a quite remarkable track record. What do you think are the key factors behind this achievement?
I try to say one thing is, don't believe in rumors that it's impossible.
Okay.
That has always been my approach, that, well, if you're good, you can try and you can succeed. But then there is, of course, this success, getting experience, getting to know good partners all over Europe makes better chances for getting more projects and other projects. So I think for the first one, quite a decisive reason was that we teamed up with an organization that where many different partners, science partners, but also user partners from all over Europe were organized. So we had a network before we started writing the proposal. And then afterwards, we have been picking partners quite strategically and depending on their experience and what they can give to the project.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're a professor at the Department of Psychology at NTNU. Still, your engagement in Horizon 2020 has largely been within societal challenge 3, secure, clean and efficient energy. Now, intuitively, one might think that this field, the field of energy, is not really associated with psychology or even social sciences and humanities at all. How do you comment on that type of perception?
That is, in fact, a question that I get from time to time. Why are you, as a psychologist, interested in such topics? But then again, you see that a lot of the policy on the European and national level has changed from technology development in the energy sector to understanding how people's behavior is caused, how people use energy, and how lifestyles of people shape energy use. And to answer such questions, it's of course behavior science that is relevant. And also humanities are interesting when you look at such like more cultural aspects of how energy behavior is shaped. So the projects that we have are often either completely within social science and humanities, or projects where we have both technology parts and the social science parts that look at, for example, if a technology is developed, how can you, or how do people use that technology? How does it change their everyday life? And also, what do they sometimes do with the technology that the engineers didn't expect?
So this all sounds, I must say, very positive for the audience of this event. Would you think that these comments that you made now for the field of energy also applies to other fields that are more related traditionally to technology and engineering?
Absolutely. So in my group, I see that we have more requests for participation in EU projects than we can handle, because it's often now written into the calls that you must have this societal perspective in your project. So there's a lot of room for social science and also humanities in the interdisciplinary projects of Horizon Europe.
Mm-hmm. Christian, what is your experience in working with non-academic partners?
Non-academic partners are interesting to work with, sometimes challenging to work with. So I think the key is that they really need to have a stake in the project and that they really need to have a role. So sometimes you build project consortia where you add a user partner and they're not really interested in the project, and that doesn't really work. So we now have a project at the moment running where the user partners do not get a lot of money, but they get something that is important for their business and for their, well, sometimes it's municipalities, sometimes it's energy companies, and they are interested in getting the results and in trying some things, and that works really well. So if they have an active role and if they know why they're in the project, then it's really rewarding working with them, and you must absolutely not underestimate them as an academic partner. And on the other hand, you need to be aware that you need to explain your science in a different way. Because an energy company, they are not used to use scientific models, for example. They want to have other types of answers. And working into that and really planning for that in a project is a good idea. And on the other hand, makes them very exciting again.
Uh-huh. In the framework program, and in particular in the pillar 2 and 3, there are clear societal objectives. For example, in the field of energy, public health, and in the green transition. Some researchers are skeptical that the societal and political objectives become too important in setting the research agenda. Have you, as a principal investigator, ever experienced that your research has been sort of impeded and your autonomy has been impeded by collaborating in these type of projects?
Not in these type of projects. It's different when you do like research for a company. Mm-hmm. But in these projects, there is no influence on what you do in the research project. There is, of course, the influence how the calls are written and what kind of answers they want to have. Mm. But what the answers are, that's up to us in the projects. And I have to say, I agree to quite a large degree with the European Commission that we need to come closer from generating even more scientific knowledge to make it actually usable in European society. So I'm quite excited to see how Horizon Europe plays out.
So Christian, I know that you and your group has had some really good news lately from the European Commission. Could you please tell us a little bit about where you're going from here?
Yes, just the other day we heard that one of the projects where we're part in the proposals gets funding, and it gets funding with a really, really good evaluation result in a very hard competition. So we will continue to work on energy transition questions for the next couple of years.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having us here in your garden.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
So we will now move on in the program to the two projects, Shape ID and the Norwegian Shape Initiative. We have put these two projects in the same session, but I have to confess that the similarity in project names is actually a coincidence. SHAPE IDEA is an acronym drawn from the full name Shaping Interdisciplinary Practices in Europe, and the abbreviation SHAPE, as it is used by the Norwegian initiative, which we will hear about soon, was coined first in the UK and stands for Social Sciences, Humanities and the Arts for People and the Economy. But as I hope you will agree, I think that the projects fit very well into the same session. So Darren Wallace has been the project manager of the SHAPE ID Horizon 2020 projects at the Trinity Long Room Hub Arts and Humanities Research Institute at Trinity College Dublin since February 2019. Darren holds a Master of Science in Technology and Learning from Trinity College Dublin and a PhD in Media from Dublin Institute of Technology. Darren, thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you for the invitation.
Could you please just briefly present the SHAPE ID project for our audience?
Sure. Well, SHAPE ID is a 2.5-year coordination and support action funded by the Horizon Europe programme. And its purpose is to address the challenge of improving SSH integration, as the Commission call it, or AHSS integration, as we call it, to prioritise also the arts and humanities. So we address several different stakeholder groups, funders and policymakers, individual researchers, research organizations, and to a somewhat lesser extent, but important, potential societal partners in civil society or industry. And we've essentially been trying to survey and review the field to understand best practice, what works and what doesn't. We've conducted extensive academic and policy literature reviews, a survey, some interviews with policymakers, and 6 stakeholder workshops across Europe with over 160 participants to learn from people's experience and what they know and try to pull together recommendations and ultimately our toolkit, which I'll talk about a little bit, I think, later, to basically help all of these different stakeholder groups on sort of pathways to improve how they do and support inter and transdisciplinary research with SSH integration.
Thank you. So you mentioned just briefly now the SHAPE ID toolkit. And you had your big launch of this toolkit now just a week ago, actually, exactly today, on the 10th of June, with a large number of participants from all over Europe. Could you please tell us a little bit more about what is the SHAPE ID toolkit and what is its purpose?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, so the toolkit is really the culmination of our 2.5 years' work. It's a web-based toolkit, and it is designed to help these groups I mentioned, researchers, research organizations, funders, policymakers, and societal partners to learn more about interdisciplinary research, but also to take concrete steps to improve how they do it or how they support it. So it's intended to be very practical. So its structure is essentially, we're a coordination and support action. So we start from the point of view that there's a lot of experience out there, a lot of existing recommendations, guides, reports, but there's fragmentation in the area. So the toolkit is structured around kind of curating a lot of resources around the topics that we found to be challenging or relevant to our stakeholder groups. So it gathers together a lot of these, a great point of access to these existing resources. We've also produced our own case studies, our own reflective tools, interviews with experts, and a series of guides that provide kind of quicker access to these. So it covers topics ranging from, how to better understand interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity, how to develop the skills you might need as a researcher to bridge disciplinary divides, how to develop an interdisciplinary career, for example, for early career researchers. And then for those outside of research, supporting research, guides about supporting, funding, and evaluating collaborative research.
So we have added the link to the SHAPE ID toolkit in the chat. So if anybody wants to check it out, they can use it. So is the toolkit open for everybody to use?
Absolutely, yes. It's an open web-based resource, and we hope everybody will use it, explore it, and tell us what they think. Give us feedback if they find it useful. We'd love to know how people are using it as well, now that we've produced it and launched it to the world.
I've been following the SHAPE ID project for a while, and I've seen that you focus quite heavily on stressing the role of arts and humanities. This is sometimes a little bit in contrast to the use of the sort of the SSH umbrella, where often you can see a more focus on harder social sciences. So what is your message to those in the audience representing the arts and humanities?
Well, it's true. Obviously, the SSH monitoring reports, which I think Tobias also mentioned, have revealed that there's a very, very low participation of the arts and humanities compared to many of the social sciences. So that's something we specifically set out to address in our workshop topics and in the kind of recommendations that we made, because there's also a gap in the literature. It's not as represented in the literature as the social science integration. But obviously our argument, I suppose, is that we need these broader perspectives in order to really address the true complexity of complex societal challenges. We make sense of life through stories and symbols and meaning-making activity, and we need to acknowledge the importance of the social sciences and humanities in kind of being able to address these properly. So I think bringing in humanities and arts perspectives in problem framing for a start, and how we understand a problem before we go about trying to solve it is really, really important. In terms of kind of concrete sort of a message to the arts and humanities researchers, I would say that we should be confident as arts and humanities researchers that you really do have something to contribute. Even if you're kind of more accustomed to the mode of research, a kind of sole scholarship mode of research, it's worth really taking some time to reflect on how what your research can contribute and how you can communicate this so that you can reach out to colleagues in other disciplines and start to talk about areas where you might have common interest, and in other words, kind of be proactive about thinking about, reflecting about, and then opening out to how you position yourself as a potential collaborator in collaborative research. And I don't want to say that this is a path that everybody should take, but that it can be an interesting and a rewarding path to open out to contributing to and participating in research that addresses the societal challenges that you care about. So.
Okay, Darren, thank you very much for this introduction to the Shape ID project and the Shape ID toolkit. I really hope that people in the audience will take a look at the toolkit using our link, and of course, as you said, feel free to get in touch with you also if they have if they have the intention of joining you in your effort. So thank you very much. So now we will move on to the next speaker, and as I mentioned, the other Shape project. Aurora Hoel is a professor of media studies and visual culture at NTNU. She is one of the initiators of the Norwegian Shape initiative. Aurora has experience with interdisciplinary research, having been the principal investigator on a research project on brain imaging in collaboration with neuroscientists, and more recently, a Marie Sklodowska-Curie Action Fellow at the Humboldt University, conducting a project on the use of advanced imaging technologies in surgery, in collaboration with surgeons. So Aurora, thank you for joining us in this meeting.
Thank you, Eric, and also for the opportunity to be able to present the Norwegian Shape initiative.
Tell us a little bit about this. What is this new Norwegian Shape initiative?
Yeah, as you already mentioned, so the Norwegian initiative takes its inspiration from a British campaign that was launched last summer, where the London School of Economics, the Arts Council England, and the British Academy joined forces to rebrand and promote the humanities and social sciences under the heading of Shape. And they did this in an attempt to emulate the success of the educational term STEM, as we know from before, of course. And what we found particularly attractive about the Shape campaign was the bold and confident way it puts the Shape disciplines forward, and also the broad alliance of disciplines involved, including law and economy and art and the arts. And the Norwegian Shape campaign, so who are we? It's headed by Ina Blom at the University of Oslo, Asbjørn Grønstad at the University of Bergen, and me at NTNU. And so far, what we have done is to gather support from colleagues, and also we have had some initial meetings with the leaderships of our respective universities. And so far, and we have done that to gain institutional backing for the campaign. And just now, we are also in the process of approaching colleagues at the Arctic University of Norway. So as soon as we have secured an institutional platform for this SHAPE initiative, we hope to broaden our network even further by including more educational and research institutions, as well as museums and policy institutions.
So what would you say are your main objectives for this initiative?
The main aim is to promote and to secure visibility for what we call the SHAPE disciplines in society. And we think that the term SHAPE can be useful in this respect, since it's easy to remember, easy to pronounce, and also, most importantly, says something, gives a hint about what our disciplines are about. And this promotion work also includes a reappraisal of the importance and relevance of SHAPE disciplines. So what we want to do is to help articulate what these disciplines contribute to society and call attention to the special skills and special values they are developing, which we think or are convinced are key to healthy democracies. And in this way, we also seek to raise the standing of SHAPE disciplines among politicians and in society more generally. And we want to do this by facilitating public debates about urgent topics and policy questions, sort of discussing them at the meta level publicly, pertaining to our disciplines, so policy questions of relevance for our disciplines. And also we hope to facilitate arenas for dialogues between SHAPE and STEM. And to this end, we are planning a series of public events and debates and workshops. SHAPE saloons and SHAPE symposia, which are going to go on. Yeah.
That sounds great. So you touched upon it already, but I would like to ask you now that according to the SHAPE name, you're working to promote, say, SSH and the arts for people and the economy. I guess referring to the major societal challenges. So what role do you see for these disciplines in addressing the main societal challenges that we face?
Yeah, so of course, when it comes to these major challenges, we are convinced that the SHAPE disciplines will have to play a vital role. And of course, now this is seems to be realized more broadly as well, hopefully. And we also hope that our initiative can contribute to this in at least 3 ways. First, as we know and already touched upon, I guess, today, so the major challenges are often defined in policy documents and funding schemes, and the way they are defined are often framed in STEM terms, and thus formulated in ways foreign to the vocabularies of the SHAPE discipline, not the least humanities and the arts. And I think this is part of the reason why some SHAPE researchers are sometimes reluctant to get involved in interdisciplinary missions. So we hope that SHAPE can help facilitate this kind of work by articulating our skills and values and things like that, and also by playing a role as a translator. So that's one way. A second way will be, we think also that new challenges have to be identified that are framed in SHAPE terms from begin with, and that emerge from our home turf, so to speak, of the SHAPE disciplines. I think there are much more challenges and the common list, which is of course super important challenges, but I think there are more important challenges. So that's a second point. And last but not least, we also hope that SHAPE can contribute to question the strong emphasis on challenges and missions, calling attention to what is lost when the dominant funding schemes are all geared towards solution, or not all, but many of them, most of them, this strong push towards solution-based and outcome-oriented research approaches. So that's, a third thing we hope to contribute.
Yeah. So I know that the Norwegian SHAPE initiative is not like NOSHH, made to sort of promote the SSH in Horizon Europe. So that's not your main purpose. But still, I would like to ask you a really tricky question now. How can an initiative like NOSHH, like SHAPE, help strengthen the role of our disciplines in Horizon Europe?
That's a great question, of course, and I guess this kind of questions is what we're going to work on. So this will be just my very premature take on it. But perhaps we can do that by articulating the special skills and values, as I already mentioned, developed by our SHAPE discipline. I think there's really some work to be done here to put the words to these skills. And also the special contribution that our disciplines, which of course are very different, but still to have that broader spectrum of contribution, to put words on those, which in turn may help frame the major challenges in more accessible ways. So that was one thing. And at the same time, also questioning the strong focus on mission-driven research, and by reminding decision makers that there are different ways of being relevant for society. So I think also that our purpose could also be to help shed light of different ways of doing this, and that some of these ways require long-term investments in basic research. So maybe a stronger, that the societal relevance of basic research, basically.
I think those are great points. And we might get back to that type of discussion also now in the later part of the program, because I think that's very, very relevant. Just now, briefly in the end, so many in our audience, maybe they would like to promote SHAPE at their own institution or join your effort in another way. Is there any way to get involved now, or do you have future plans to extend your platform?
We certainly have plans to expand. We're just now trying to get the backing, institutional backing first, and then as soon as the platform is in place, we will start expand. And if anyone is interested, please get in touch. We are very interested in expanding our network. So yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for presenting the SHAPE initiative and taking part in the program, and you will also join us now for the later part of the program. Thank you, Aurora. So that actually concludes the first part of our program. I would like to express my thanks to the participants so far. And also now, before we move to the discussion part, I would like to introduce one more participant. And in addition to the people that you met now already during the first hour, I would like to ask the project leader of NOSHH to join us for the discussion, Caroline Daugstad. Caroline Daugstad is the Vice Dean for Research at the Faculty of Social and Educational Sciences at NTNU, where she's also a professor in geography. Caroline, thank you for joining us for the discussion part.
Well, thank you for facilitating this great first hour. It has been really interesting and quite inspiring, I must admit, to hear all these presentations and perspectives. So I really look forward to the next hour and the discussion. So that's all for me so far.
And now, before we move to the discussion part, I would also like to ask Tobias to join me for the discussion. So, actually, to continue maybe a little bit on the very last point that we heard Aurora talk about, I have a question for the panel, maybe specifically for Gabi and Aurora. So I think that both NOSHH and also the Norwegian SHAPE initiative will agree that strong domestic funding for the arts, humanities and social sciences is important to create opportunities for involvement from our disciplines in European projects. First of all, do you agree with this statement? And do you have any additional comment? And what is the current state for SSH around Europe? Maybe Gabi, could you give us your comments first?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've been working a lot with the individual national ministry to encourage a dedicated strategy for social science humanities. We need to start thinking about, I think multidisciplinary, and Doriana will back me up on that. Multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary can only happen when you have a very healthy disciplines at the core. And if you don't have a proper investment at the national level, if you don't have the long-term sustainabilities of the disciplines in different contexts, you cannot do all the other experimentations. It's a little bit like bricks of a house. We can build anything with bricks, but if you don't have the solid bricks, you can't build any alternative places. And this is important. We've been fostering the concept of portfolio approach when we talk about, for example, the missions. We don't have to do, if you look at COVID-19, there are most of this example. Not everybody has to be locked in a lab looking for the virus or looking for the vaccine. Our social scientists have been advising the government about social distancing, about mental health. Everybody play a role and a part in a mission, and we collectively address a mission with multiple solutions, which is a little bit what I was saying earlier, I think.
To comment on this?
Should I say, was it me now?
Yes, please, Aurora.
Okay, yes, I very much agree with Gabi, all her points, and I definitely think there is room for improvement when it comes to domestic funding, and I think, yeah, that also the basic research and open research needs to be, I think, interdisciplinarity to have productive in that sense also needs more funding of the basic research as well. That there needs to be a better balance there. Yeah, and also to articulate and realize the relevance of the basic research, the societal relevance. To put words on that, too, I think that's key in this.
Okay, thank you very much. Diren, please.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, yes, I completely agree with what Gabi and Aurora have said. In Shape ID, we've looked at the role of the importance of national funding as well. And one of the examples we provide in our toolkit is a case study of the Irish Research Council, just a small national funder with not a huge budget, but what they have done is, as well as supporting all of the disciplines in a very foundational and fundamental way, is work on building capacity. So interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research requires strong disciplines, but then it also requires capacity building. So they provide some small, really small, like 10,000, 15,000 networking grants for people to build consortia, interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary consortia with societal partners to work towards societal challenges. And then they also have schemes for AHSS leadership that must have STEM co-investigators. So they have these, again, smaller scale project funding where people can start to gain experience and that helps to build capacity. So I think that's something that is working very well in the Irish context. It's led to further successes in ERC and in Horizon 2020, and it's something that we would certainly recommend for other national funders to take a look at.
Thank you. Jan Paul?
I just wanted to mention from the Norwegian context that the Norwegian Research Council are trying to balance the amount of money on each project that goes to partners abroad and international partners. And I think this element should be taken into consideration, namely the future applications to the EU programs, because that is an excellent opportunity for Norwegian research institutions to build networks and consortium for future applications into the EU system. And with regard to trans and interdisciplinarity, which is required in the EU projects, it's a bit uncommon maybe for Norwegians to reach not to the next and to your neighbor in discipline, but to your next of kin or all the way down the road neighbor in as far as disciplines goes. So we're ending up with not only with sociologists and political scientists, let's say, but also with artists and people across disciplinary borders that we usually do not cross in the national programs. But that is highly valued in the European context, securing impact, etc. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. So I guess we could sum up with saying that the domestic funding could be both sort of the foundation and also, as you now mentioned, Jan Paul, even the door opener for international and European collaboration. So and also, of course, international collaboration even outside Europe. let's go to another topic here. We have briefly heard about missions in the program. Tobias mentioned this during his talk. And this is a new and exciting part of the framework program, but the details still seem a bit vague. So what's going on now in the discussion of missions, and what are the main opportunities for SSH involvement? And maybe as you are the national contact point for missions, Tobias, you could address this first, and then if anybody else would like to comment, please feel free. Tobias.
Yes, thank you, Eric. By the 1st of July, the Cabinet of Vice President Vestager will decide how many of these 5 proposed mission areas will get the green light. And also the mission boards who are linked to all of these 5 areas, the new members will be appointed in the fall. So that's important for Norwegian and international researchers and institutions to think about getting the right people in the right boards. This year, it's mostly focused in the work program of missions on support and coordination support actions, where they focus on the links between Brussels, European, national and regional levels. So the SSH community was a bit disappointed when the 5 areas were chosen, which might be understandable, but I hope that the SSH community can turn this to an opportunity, because like in clusters societal challenges, there will be SSH STEM cooperation. Engaging people, citizens, is even more important than in other parts of the program. More focus on societal impact, and also it's very political. So the climate change plus governance field, urban policies, trust and public engagement is really central, and also balancing urban and rural aspects, for example, which goes for several of the missions. So I think it's really crucial that you take the opportunity now to follow the development.
So it's going to be exciting times now over the next few months, just both to see what is really going to happen, and also some of the important decision makers for the future of the mission program will be decided. So the SSH community should be on their feet to take part. Are there any other comments for the missions part? Yeah, Gabi, please.
Yeah, with issue we've been working a lot to have an SSH-driven mission, which didn't eventually came through. So actually, my what I want to say, to start working now for when the new missions will be decided. It might sounds a bit weird, and actually this goes as well for the framework program. We needed to start as the new program is launched. We need to start working to foresee and design and frame the next framework program and design the next missions. It's really important that we do this early. And in this case, we were talking earlier about national funding. They are crucial, because at the end of the day, these are negotiations between member states. Now, if some discipline areas of interest, research focus, are important at the national level, they will be stronger also in the discussion for the European collaboration. So we needed to have a better presence when we discuss the next generation of mission, when we discuss the next calls for Horizon Europe in 22 to 24. We need to be there when we discuss, and at the moment, the 2 major discussions in Europe are the design of the European research area in line and in synergy with the European higher education area. We need to be there. We need to be sitting at the table to discuss the things and to design the things from scratch. And that's very important. It's even more important than engaging immediately what is on the table, which is the product of what we've been working on for the last 4 years, and start planning and programming for the next.
Okay. no more comments related to missions. I understand that it's a very difficult question because it's still very much sort of up in the air, and we will see now over the next few months how it's going to materialize. So over to another topic, the topic of how to build networks and establish networks and strengthen networks. Jan Paul talked about this during his presentation before. So traditionally, we might say that the advice on how to establish and strengthen networks has been to travel and to go to conferences, to deliver a keynote, to be active in networking, to approach people at the poster stand and so forth. So of course we all hope that we will be able to travel again soon, but there might be both for reasons from the pandemic, but also for, I would say, climate reasons, that we will have to reduce travel and interact in a different way. So I guess in some way you might say that this lack of physical venues may introduce an even higher obstacle also for interdisciplinary networking. So I wonder if anybody in the panel has any advice for how to, do you agree on this description of the future reality, and do you have any advice on how we should handle it? Maybe Darren, would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, it's definitely an ongoing challenge, and I'm not sure anybody has perfectly solved it. I would say that interdisciplinary encounters don't necessarily happen at disciplinary conferences anyway, so they have their own challenges regardless. I think, obviously, as Jan Paul has highlighted, there's a kind of, and I think Christian as well, as you get more involved in projects, there's a kind of an amplification effect where the rich get richer. You already have networks, and that you build on those networks, and you have more opportunities because of that. What comes up in the sort of, I suppose, in people's experience of interdisciplinary research is that kind of capacity building at a local level is a good start. So, to actually learn how to communicate at an interdisciplinary level to bridge the communication gap between disciplines is something people can start already kind of in their home institutions, and that there's kind of a really important role for universities to build capacity at a local level. This is something that Harald Hartung mentioned at our launch and at other events recently as well, that the European Commission can request these kind of interdisciplinary encounters and this greater SSH integration, but if universities aren't building capacity for it, it's going to be difficult. The community isn't going to be necessarily ready to position themselves and to participate. And also an awful lot of interdisciplinary collaborations do start from the bottom up, just from curiosity-led research, from reaching out to other disciplines. So, I think starting within your own university, figuring out how to position yourself and having those kind of conversations locally to start to build your own capacity to connect across disciplines.
Thank you very much. So Jan Paul, please.
No, I agree that I think the effect of the corona pandemic has been to amplify the differences that were already there. So entering in, being fresh, coming fresh to the field, not having a network, that has the threshold has become higher to enter a network. So a tip related to that is, I think, that the importance of established networks, formal networks, institutional networks, has increased, and maybe will become even more important as we move forward. So, and some of these networks are interdisciplinary, and you can actually apply as an institution and engage in standing committees and subcommittees under these networks. One such example from my field is the IMISCO network, which has itself been awarded Horizon 2020 projects that we have taken part in. So, and then they have meetings, they have conferences, there is communication in the subgroups, etc. So those types of formal networks may be helpful when that personal contact, one-to-one, is not as easy to achieve and to take the first contact as it was previously. Thank you.
Thank you. Tobias?
Yes, I want to pick up a point that Gabi made, and this regards both networks and how to influence the development. So when I worked as a national expert on SSH integration, one of the happiest moments, so to say, was when we managed to get alliances, and I also touched upon this in my previous talk, to get support from non-typical SSH partners. So, for example, the advisory group on future and emerging technologies had a position paper on the importance of SSH working closely with the STEM fields. And also the CESAR, which is the Alliance for Natural Sciences, also emphasize this point. So to continue to seek partners that are not typical, I think it's crucial for this work.
Yeah, so thank you. If I could add to the question already posed, I mean, Jan Paul, you also already mentioned the role of serving as an expert, as a sort of an entry point here. And Caroline, you have also served as an evaluator in assessing European projects. Can you tell a little bit about that and that role, how you got into that, and if it has had any effect of bringing you closer to the work?
Yes, thank you, Erik. I would be happy to do that. As Jan Paul, I have been acting as expert reviewer and followed both on applications at different stages, but also following one project throughout its whole life cycle, to put it like that. And yes, it is an eye-opener, even if I had been part of many EU-funded projects before and thought I sort of knew the game. It was really interesting to see how people cooperated, what were the obstacles, what were the opportunities, and how one can interpret the templates and the calls and the contracts with the Commission. And I also gained from it personally as a researcher, because I now know several scholars and also scientific institutions, which I would really like to make contact with. So it really gives you something to build on for your own research, and it also broadens the perspectives of the pitfalls and also the possibilities, the wonderful possibilities that these European projects offer. Yeah.
How did you become an expert evaluator? What do you have to do to get into that role? Caroline, maybe you can go first.
I can just follow up on that, because I think you asked me that initially and I forgot to answer. Well, I tried to be best in class and do what the rector at our university said that all professors and associate professors should do, to sign up as a reviewer for the Commission. And I thought, well, why not? I probably won't get chosen, because there obviously are a number of people there. But they pointed at me on several occasions, and it's quite a it's kind of stressful when you're in the call and there are deadlines and there are people to co-reviewers to coordinate with, but afterwards it's quite interesting and rewarding in many ways. So I responded to the NTNU call, and I have not regretted that decision yet.
So Gabi, before I give you the word, I know that EASH has been very focused on the role of evaluators also in the SSH flagged topics, and maybe the lack of experts with the appropriate skills. So maybe there is some encouragement to our community also in your response, just expecting from you some input on that, referring also to the flag topics. Please, Gabi.
First of all, I put the link in the chat for how to register as an expert. There's a link, you just register yourself. And the important thing is to think about your research from the policy perspective, not just on the narrow perspective of your policy. I'm myself a reviewer in ethics, and this is really fascinating because panels for ethics tend to be multidisciplinary, and we have interesting, fantastic conversations of things that then not necessarily we take for granted. I remember an evaluation about IP addresses, if they were personal data or not. An engineer was saying an IP address is a thing, and an IP address is actually a thing linked to a person. So it's really nice to see how in a panel you can really bring your ideas to the table and compare with others. I also remember a discussion about evaluation of the missions. It was done very early on when I first discussed the mission at the European Commission. And they invited a small group of people to discuss how to evaluate the missions. And they're talking about key performance indicators. And I asked what a mission is. And they said, oh, it doesn't really matter what a mission is, as long as we find the key performance indicators to evaluate them. And I kept saying, well, yes, but you cannot evaluate something that you don't know. It's very different to evaluate how to clean the plastic from the bottom of the sea or the ocean and how to clean up bodies from the bottom of the Mediterranean. And you know, this discussion really helped policymakers, but also other scholars to think in a different context. I also had the privilege to coordinate a panel of evaluation at ERC, where you think being bottom up is all the same. Actually, I've been lucky enough to sit in and coordinate a panel for life science, one for chemistry, and 3 panels for social science humanities. The tradition of the disciplines in evaluate the project is so different. So if we take, I don't know, publications for one, everybody knows publications, top ranking is a sign of quality. Then publication with a supervisor in a starting grant scheme, well, for the life science is normal, you all work in a lab. For chemistry is, well, there's a little bit of not total independence. For social science humanities, it's great if you publish it with a supervisor, must be a genius. So tradition of the way how we evaluate things as a scientist and coming from researcher traditions, it's really matter. And it matters when we sit around the panel. So if it's true that finally the Commission will take on board our recommendation to preset the panels which are multidisciplinary for particularly for all panels, really, for all the calls, and you have a component of different disciplines that sitting and facing each other, we might have a much more interesting evaluation in the end. Sorry, monopolizing conversation.
Great, that's great advice. Thank you very much. And I was just now finishing this part on the expert evaluation. I would just mention that for those of you who are interested, the Research Council actually has a 1-hour workshop on the topic of how to become an expert evaluator next week. So we will share the registration link and the information link for this event in the chat. So now during our discussion, we have heard several times from, I guess, actually from all of you, the concepts of multidisciplinarity, transdisciplinarity and interdisciplinarity in relation to addressing societal challenges. Maybe Darren, could you say a little bit about how these concepts have been sort of analyzed and defined during the Shape ID project, and also, of course, the others, if you would like to come in, Aurora and others later to comment on the use of these concepts and how we can address societal challenges in these manners. Please, Darren.
Sure, thanks. Well, yeah, the first thing I would say is that from the work in Shape ID, it's a complex field, and there's a reluctance to sort of overly simplify it and say this one concept means this one thing. So there's many different kinds of multi, inter, and transdisciplinarity. I think one of the helpful ways, if you're just getting started before you sort of dive into the differences, because there are differences at regional level, there's differences across the world, and there's differences within different communities. For example, in the UK, interdisciplinarity covers every kind of sort of interaction between disciplines and other partners, whereas in many parts of Europe, transdisciplinarity is used to kind of signify that it's more problem focused, for example, and that there's external partners who are outside of academia as well involved. So, but in a simple way, I suppose you start with the idea of an academic discipline as a sort of a repository of accumulated knowledge and methods and practices. And then it's a matter of how much you move away from those. So multidisciplinarity is typically understood as, in a sense, parallel work, juxtaposition of two or more different perspectives, but they may not integrate. They may not actually need to combine their knowledge to find a new thing. They may have different perspectives that are valuable on the same problem. When you move towards interdisciplinarity or transdisciplinarity, there is more emphasis on this idea of integration, that you could have methods, concepts, data, theories that would be somehow knitted together in some way in order to solve the problem, in order to address the problem. It's not all problem focused either, I should say. Obviously, a lot of interdisciplinarity is it can take place within a single discipline, sort of absorbing insights, things from other disciplines. So it can be quite focused, but a lot of the time when we're talking about collaborative research, we're talking about people from different disciplines working together, and that's why obviously it takes so much time. There's a lot of different understanding, and the further apart the disciplines are, as Gabby was saying, there's so much difference between, say, the life sciences and the social sciences, humanities, but then there's so much differences within those once you get down to the difference between a historian and a psychologist, or or a historian and literary studies people maybe have more in common. So there's kind of distances to overcome, and the greater the distances, the more there is a need for sort of careful unpacking of understandings and expectations at the beginning of a project. Then when you move into transdisciplinarity, it's generally understood, I think the OEC defined it recently in their addressing societal challenges using transdisciplinary research as involving more than one discipline. Some of those disciplines have to be social sciences, humanities, and some have to be STEM, but then also it has to involve societal partners. So it tends to be more problem focused. So in a sense, it's moving more and more from the disciplinary silo towards the problem, and then the need to overcome those silos to address the societal problem.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments to this challenging question there, please, Tobias?
Yes, just a small comment, and I had a lot of discussions about that in Brussels. I think it's very helpful to have distinctions between these different types of cross interdisciplinarity, but of course in collaboration projects you want to get more and more actors and more sectors involved, and they are not so familiar with these distinctions. So in a large consortium, I don't think we should overemphasize this issue.
Thank you. Yeah, it could be a good idea, but it sounds from what Darren said that this could also be sort of used as an analytic tool to prepare your projects. If you look at the way they've done it in the Shape ID projects, you might have some clarity on what you would like to achieve. So that could be sort of we can think about these complicated issues for ourselves and not discuss it with the others. Okay, Jan Paul, please.
No, I think the distinctions were really helpful that Dorian made. We in our project, the ongoing project, which is called Bridges, and one of the reasons for that name is to bridge disciplines. So the interdisciplinarity, which is kind of which was required in the call, is highlighted very much, and it's discussed. And bringing together people from different disciplines, it takes a lot of discipline, basically, to make it so that everyone benefits, so that the weaker disciplines, if you will, or those parts of the project that have less funding, for example, lose out on the larger pictures, and when you're forced to write a text together, for example. And it boils down the challenges of the real interdisciplinarity boils down to, for example, if I'm as a sociologist cooperate with people in economics and national economics, their view of the actor as a rational being makes it very difficult for them to move away from that, and it's difficult for me to accept that basic premise. So finding ways around those actual, actual parts that do not fit together, that is a major challenge. And you can pretend that you can kind of, normally you can work your way around it, but sometimes in a common text, and when it's really put to the test, it's really, really challenging, because they won't give up their view of what a human is and how it acts. And I cannot do that either. So that's where we, so having that, but getting that into the open and using the concepts that Dorian introduced at a very early stage, ideally before the application is handed in, that is very helpful. So thank you for pointing that out, Dorian.
Yeah. So to comment on your comment, Jan Paul, it's we're not only here talking about the interdisciplinarity between let's call it the shape disciplines and the STEM disciplines, but in your case, even a sociologist and an economist can have difficulties understanding each other's conceptions. So thank you for that. Aurora, please.
Yes, thank you, and also thank you to Dorian for your clarifications here. And I'm just thinking of my own experience with my project, where there were collaboration between shape and STEM. And of course, our ideals, or what we're hoping for, was also to obtain some kind of integration. But one lesson we learned here actually also goes back to what we talked about earlier about relating to the funding and the building in the domestic field, maybe, or the domestic stage before, is because for example, with the BRAIN project that I was heading, the funding was primarily for the shape researchers, and of course, that very much limits the time that the STEM partners could actually allocate to the work. And I think this really, to obtain this good, to have a very, at least if you aim for integration, you really need a lot of time and to build. So that's what one lesson, at least, that funding for everyone or people will not have the enough time to do that. So yeah, and also the long term, I guess that's what your toolkit is about, Dorian, partly, is also this time element here. And to build a personal relations as well, is very key here, to actually know and trust each other, even if you don't. Yeah, I think that's at least the really successful project I know about, then they actually know each other. And there's the trust that is built over time is a key here, I think.
Were there any other comments to this particular topic? No, thank you. Yeah, please, Carolina. Carolina, please. Yes.
Yes, thank you. It is really interesting, this discussion of concerning the different levels of networks, because I think that's what we have been discussing partly. And we've heard from Jan Paul and also from Christian how it all started. With Christian, it started with 1 year project, and then it kind of multiplied, and he was in the system, as he said. And Jan Paul, you started as an expert reviewer, and then it's kind of took off from there. And the rest of you have been talking about these more formal networks between institutions. They could be tagged SSH, or they could be more like university alliances, like the Guild, for example, which was on one of the PowerPoints here. So my reflection is, are we able to sort of bridge the gap vertically? Because you have the researchers who have to develop their personal networks and go to conferences and be bold and sign up as a reviewer and also to present ideas. And then we have the formal networks between the institutions and the universities and so on. But is it something in between there? How should we facilitate the gap, if you understand me? Perhaps the digital conferences that could be arranged by these formal networks, but informed by the the personal researcher networks could really be a scene or an event that could kind of bring these two networking levels together. I don't know if this makes sense, but I would be happy to hear your reflections on it. Perhaps Gabi and Tobias, who are on that level, and then researchers who are more on the ground level, to put it like that. But networking is still a key to success. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Gabi first, and then Tobias.
Yeah, we've been advocating for university to create some kind of research development. So whereas STEM has been doing this for quite a long time, so a unit within the universities who understand what the funding trends are at the national, international level, and understand what the trends of research are within an institutions. Social science humanities have been left behind in that, in many institutions, mainly because they don't bring as much money as the STEM traditionally. With the creation of this research development in universities, so there are people with PhD. I set up the first research development unit at the LSE. I hired 4 people with PhDs, and they can engage with the research trends, but they can also attend policy events, for example, in Brussels, where they have content elsewhere. So they can do that meta level. And to be honest, the research funding today is such a big competition. We're talking about over 3 trillions of money are spent in research and development worldwide. It's not a sort of I just got an idea, let's go for it. It's a less strategic, it needs a bit more expertise at the institutional level to frame and to construct and to organize, not top down, but a certain level of coordination within an institution and across institutions to create this kind of meta level that you just mentioned.
Okay, thank you very much, Tobias.
All this will be very much in line with what Gabi said, and I think it reflects that we have worked together on these issues for very many years. But one point is that Horizon Europe, even though it's differing quite a lot from Horizon 2020, it's very silo-based still, even though the clusters of the societal challenges are becoming very large. So they also will experience internal coordination challenges and interdisciplinary challenges within one challenge. But you know, you have the program committee structure and you have info days based on one societal challenge for the most part. And this, I think, NOSHH and NOSHH and Shape ID and others really can help with. And we had some events in Brussels with networks such as Net for Society, the Guild and NOSHH, etc., to really highlight the importance of possibilities across the challenges. So I think that can be done much more in the future.
So it sounds like we already have a program for our next event in Brussels now, and we can start traveling again. Caroline, did you take the notes now for our next program? Jan Paul, please.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Jan Paul, please.
Just really quickly, just to the level of networks that people can participate in. At the researcher level, I think that the topical networks are extremely important and will stay important. So in my case, that would be I'm a member, for example, of an international refugee research network, which spans the world and normally has international conferences. But this is actively communicating all the time, and they have subgroups, etc. So that's one level where I'm a member as an individual researcher. The next level is where my institution is part of this European network, not as research institutions looking for funding, but as an active broader umbrella topical network regarding spanning different types of migration research. So I'm both an individual member, but also my institution is supporting this network directly as part of that. So I mean, there must be a 1,000 different variants of this, but those are 2 examples that are below the level of institutional cooperation to secure funding through the European programs. Thanks.
For bringing in this researcher perspective also to the networking possibilities. But Gabi, please.
Yeah. Can I just add a footnote? One of the things that we're doing with NOSHH, this concept of SSH integration that created all these flag topics. And I was having a conversation with the policy officer in charge of SSH integration. And I made clear that no colleagues of mine have ever been going around with SSH written on their forehead. So we need to understand from the calls, and this is some work that we're trying to do with NOSHH, if they need, I don't know, a sociologist to give the bigger context, or they need an anthropologist to give the cultural perspective, because say that you need a component of SSH in a call, it's not quite enough. So for this kind of the kind of work that we do as a network and an alliance is very much to go to the policymaker in the design, in the architecture of the program. So we're not chasing funding, we're not even fostering a collaboration across our members to do applications. That's not our role. It's very much to work with the policymaker in the design of the funding for research and innovation, and understanding what corner of the social science humanities are required in the call is quite important, as well as to then advise others to work on the calls.
Thank you. Just to follow up a little bit on that, Aurora, your initiative is, I would say, maybe you could describe it as a bottom-up initiative in terms of the researchers approaching the institutions and bringing forward ideas on how to mobilize networks, both among researchers, but also challenging the institutions to take a role. So it's sort of like a middle way between the two different perspectives that Caroline pulled up now in this question. Could you comment on that?
Yes, that's quite exactly described like that. And also, so the bottom-up perspective is important for us to retain that. And also, of course, many of the things these ideas about promoting it are already, of course, discussed, but often in more closed forums. So our idea is also to bring this discussion more out in the public, also so it's easier for other people on the floor to keep that metaphor, also engage with these questions, because now it's mostly on the silos or the linear, which is called in the university system. So to get these questions out, and also the bottom-up perspectives on those issues. That's
Thank you.
one of the key.
So we are moving now slowly towards the close of this event, but I would like to just pose a question to the panel. You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but for everyone, if you have a brief comment. So do you have any final recommendations now to members of our audience on how to strengthen their opportunities in Horizon Europe at this stage? Who would like to go first? Maybe Tobias, can I challenge you? What should they do now?
Yes, it was mentioned that, for example, in missions and also in the portfolios of the Research Council of Norway, we are going in the same direction as the EU in many aspects, with more focus on this interdisciplinarity, getting more sectors and actors involved, etc. So it's here to stay. And to make that happen, you have to be keen on, what's new in the topics, engage with your EU advisors, not necessarily in your own institution, but also use your networks in Norway and abroad. And of course, make the most out of the NCPs in the Research Council of Norway. They are very knowledgeable, and if you get no the first time, you have to just tell them that this is important and get hold of the right expertise.
Brilliant advice. Any others? Gabi, please.
My advice is don't do it yourself. In a sense, one of the things which is very overwhelming is to look at Horizon Europe and hundreds of pages and say, well, what now? It's not the way to approach this kind of funding. As Tobias mentioned, perfect good examples of national contact points and institutional contact support, research and development offices, engage with them, bring your network, bring your knowledge, bring your interest of doing something, and then work with some, they are professionals in their own rights to help you out, because I have to say, actually, one of the innovation of Horizon Europe, which I'm not so sure I would like subscribe for it, is that you have only 15 pages for one of these cooperation projects, of which only 1.5 are about the excellence of research. So it's becoming a little bit of unbalance between what is the project and what is actually all the additional bits that you have to add to it. And the researchers not necessarily have to engage in depth in these things. They are professionals that can do that very, very well. So my advice is don't do it yourself.
Any others who would like to comment on this challenging question? Maybe Darren, people should look at the toolkit.
Yeah, I didn't want to plug it too hard, but yes, I mean, I think, I guess I would say, I mean, if you're starting off, take the long view. Horizon Europe is going to run for 7 years. There'll be another one after that. So, take the time to build networks and to kind of connect with people. And if you're interested in collaborative research and interdisciplinary research, do take a look at the toolkit. We have, quite useful resources just from a range of things, like thinking about, should I collaborate? We have a reflective tool on collaboration that could be used individually or in discussion. We have tools relating to, we have support tools for research developers as well, who want to kind of foster, build capacity for AHSS integration. So there's quite a lot of resources, I think, that both researchers and their research development support offices could find useful in terms of just building that longer term pipeline on the one hand, and then thinking about different aspects of how to bring interdisciplinarity into a proposal. So for example, if your proposal is interdisciplinary, you're expected to explain how in the new proposals. So understanding a bit about how interdisciplinarity works and what methods are useful for that is useful, and our toolkit provides guides on that. But then that also, how interdisciplinarity works at the concept level needs to filter through in terms of impact and stakeholder engagement, and also in terms of implementation and planning for integration. So making sure you don't just assume it's going to happen by itself. Everybody who's done it knows it takes work. Jan Paul spoke about that, the difficulty in bridging those perspectives. So having time within a project to reflect on those processes and to actually do that integration work, as well as the ordinary sort of science that you would conduct in a project, is really important. So yeah, I would say there's lots more advice on that in our toolkit, and I hope everybody will find it useful.
Thank you. Jan Paul.
Yeah, just a small, simple tip for people wanting to engage in this. I think could be to make sure you make use of the other people that are already involved in EU projects within your institution, and from the institutional point of view, making it possible for these people to spend time to really share the knowledge of both the processes, all the different stages, the expectations, the establishing the consortium, etc., how to work with partners. All of that knowledge, a lot of that is implicit and implicit, and not made explicit. So making that possible to share, I think, is really important and easy and cheap way to go forward. And I just want to add, from a research perspective, I just want to mention that all this move towards impact and cross-trans disciplinarity I think that sets up for the individual researcher. That is all fine, but at the same time, people are expected to qualify themselves and excel within their discipline, and that's where you're scored in the stricter academical world for qualifications, etc. So it may set up a bit of a dilemma, and I think for institutions, it's important to see that pressure, that cross pressure that the individual researcher may be put under. So that's just a little bit of a question mark there, and a challenge, I guess, for institutions moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other last minute comments? If not, I would like to move on to the last part. I would like to invite Caroline Daugstad to wrap up this program, maybe give us some impressions from what you have heard. Please, Caroline.
Yes, thank you. It's been really interesting. And as I mentioned before, inspiring. More inspiring now after the second hour, in fact. And I'm left with a positive impression and a positive feeling of the opportunities in Horizon Europe. And I think it started already with Mari Sundli Tveit, the director for the Norwegian Research Council, stating that there is a space for Norwegian researchers. And then it kind of continued with Tobias Badeström, and I think you said the policy context is favorable for SSH perspectives, and I took that to my heart. And also it continued with Gabi and Gabi Lombardo and your experience from the previous framework program, and also as you explained the architecture of Horizon Europe is different when it comes to SSH perspectives. And then we heard the statements from the two active researchers, which also gave us some different perspectives on how to start and what kind of how the spark, the initial spark, gets to be more and projects and partnerships and what you learn from it. So that was really interesting and motivating. And then the two networks, different but still some commonalities. And the two networks, Shape ID and the toolkit and Shape, they came from different perspectives and you work in different ways, but I think you both offer an infrastructure as well as an opening for open discussions and to learn from each other and to share experience, because that's also been sort of a red thread through the whole event, I think. And my last words will be that the NOSHH network, we still have one event left that is on our scheduled work program, and we've got a lot of ideas and input how to frame that event, if it's possible to meet physically somewhere, or even if it's still on the digital scene. So just keep an eye on our website, and we will post news and information as soon as we have it on our next NOSHH event, which I hope we can manage in some sense. And also this collaboration between networks is really also something to take, is a take-home message, and we will keep it in mind definitely when we discuss our last NOSHH event. So thank you to everybody. This has been really fruitful and interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. And also, I would also add to Caroline's statement that we very much appreciate the contribution from everybody who has taken part now in the discussion. For the audience, please feel free to register your contact information on the NOSHH website, and then we will keep you informed about any events or other activities that we will have in the future. And maybe even that we can be able to meet in person. That would be great. And with that, thank you and goodbye.